may I have your views here, Professor Sample, about what does it mean, really, the death of Mullah Omar for the future of Taliban?
The death of Mullah Omar certainly makes the position more complicated, but it also creates opportunities. Because for the past 2 years, Akhtar Mansoor has run the Taliban movement, has presided over an escalation of the violence, but has blamed it on Mullah Omar. He said all decisions come from Mullah Omar. Now Akhtar Mansoor must take responsibility for his own leadership.
There are different views as to whether it is true or not that Mr. Omar passed away 2 years ago, as being reported by the Afghan press. And Mr. Ye, how important is that information in fact? What does it really mean, even if Mr. Omar passed away 2 years ago and Mr. Mansour have to be responsible for quote unquote everything? What does that mean for his leadership inside the Taliban?
Actually, if Mullah Omar really passed away 2 years ago, that means the Mullah Mansour has already taken the power 2 years ago. So that means he is responsible for the peace talk with the Taliban, with the Afghanistan government for these 2 years. And that also means his position is consolidated. And we can predict in the future the peace talking will continue. But if Mullah Omar was passed away a couple of weeks or a couple of months ago, just according to another kind of the mass media report, that means a lot of things remain uncertain, because whether Mullah Mansour, the position is stable or not, it will be a problem.
Right, that's interesting. Mr. Sharifi, I want to have your views as well. Now we have understanding through media reports that the Omar family has claimed so far they are not pledging allegiance to any specific political figure inside the Taliban. Therefore, some say that means more insider fighting within the Taliban. Do you agree?
I mean, on the surface, it seems like the different groups within the Taliban, either we saw also that the Tayyib, the head of the Taliban political section in Qatar, in Doha, also resigned from his position. And apparently there is also a huge kind of clash between different factions and different leaders of the Taliban. What will have it kind of, the results of it on how the Taliban will proceed on peace process or the war, I think it's not very much clear, because the Taliban leadership, despite that's been said, whether Akhtar Mansoor or even Mullah Omar, all the way from 1990s onward, have not much kind of saying and control over the military operations in Afghanistan. And most of, like, as we see, even like according to Tayyib, he didn't know that Mullah Omar is dead. I mean, until very recently that been announced. So, I mean, the actual, impact of this infighting definitely will weaken Taliban, and at least weaken the image, this monolithic image that Taliban projected of themselves as like a solid group. But on the other hand, the effects of it on the ground, on the peace process, and specifically on the fighting that's happening in the country, I think should not be exaggerated, because at the end, all the way, I mean, the Taliban leadership has not much control over their operations and their management and control and command and logistics. And actually it was done through mostly to the Pakistani army and the Pakistani agents all the way back to the 1990s. So I mean, these fightings will kind of give an image that these groups are no longer united, but the effect of it, we have to wait and see. We
have different views, it seems, among you gentlemen, about what exactly is the reality on the ground for the Taliban, and whether the inside fighting within them is the most important conflict we're witnessing, or actually outside forces such as Pakistan is playing a bigger role. Mr. Ye, your thoughts here?
Actually, we are about the death of the Mullah Omar. We are only talking about the Quetta Shura events or the situation. Quetta Shura located in Pakistan. Actually, just like our professor in Belfast mentioned, it's not very strong, strictly control the situation in Afghanistan. So we are talking about the two parts of Taliban. One is in Quetta Shura. It's the senior elders or the tribe leaders or the senior leaders of that generation in 1990s. But now in the combat zone, there's a lot
of Afghanistan
on-field operational commanders. Right. Whether they follow the instrument from the Quetta or they will run on themselves is also a problem. We can see for the last couple of years, Taliban already has a different groups, divided into the groups. Some is more pro-ISIL or ISIS. It's more dangerous. So that means while we can say the death of the Mullah Omar may be weak, the Taliban, but a weakened Taliban doesn't mean easy to be easily handled. Probably means it's more dangerous.
Professor Sample, what is your feeling? I mean, when you have some conflicts already within the Taliban leadership, whether they are situated inside Afghanistan or in Pakistan, and also we understand this connection between the leadership and the real on-the-ground fighting, the insurgency that's going on in Afghanistan, what would all of this mean for the fact of the nature of the Taliban and also the possible future of this group? Sir, go ahead.
Yes, you're asking a very challenging question. The first point to make about the Taliban is that for 20 years, it did a better job of keeping the movement together, avoiding splits, than almost any other organization in Afghan history. For 20 years, there was no significant split in the movement. And what we have seen over the past week is a genuine faction fight inside the Taliban. The unity that existed in the Taliban movement 1 week ago does not exist today. And that is an important change. It is correct that the fighters who are in the far-flung districts of Afghanistan, they're a long way from Quetta, they're a long way from the leadership, so they have always exercised a degree of autonomy, and this kind of feud in the leadership, of course, it increases the autonomy, so it leaves commanders sort of more to do what they see fit. However, if you're going to prosecute a war, whether in Afghanistan or somewhere else, you need to have a narrative, you need to have a story. Until 1 week ago, what the Taliban said that they were fighting for, and that was whether they were on the ground or whether they were sitting in Pakistan, they said they were fighting to restore the Islamic Emirate. An Islamic Emirate requires an emir. Until a week ago, all Taliban thought that they were fighting to put Mullah Omar back in charge of Afghanistan with a whole structure underneath him. Now they know that, well, we're not quite sure who our emir is because it's contested, and for the past 2 years we were living and fighting a lie because the person we thought was in charge wasn't in charge. So this undermines the narrative of the Taliban conflict.
Mr. Sharif, you want to respond to that, even though there are realities on the ground, but still, propaganda-wise and spiritual leader-wise, they still need to have one single person. And now this person has gone, no new one has come up yet that everyone agree. And what would that mean for the real nature of the Taliban and the future of the Taliban when it comes to different factions? Sir.
As Professor Sample mentioned, I mean, this nature of the groups like Taliban being a conglomerate of different kind of tribes, different clans, different ideologies even, different priorities come together, and the kind of a charismatic leadership of Mullah Omar, who apparently very few people have seen before. Nonetheless, they kind of managed to keep them together. Now, the other, what I am looking today at 2015 Taliban as opposed to 1990s, we've seen a lot has changed within the Taliban too. I mean, spiritually and in terms of theoretically, the Mullah Omar somehow presented an image and gave an identity to Taliban as who they are and what they want. But on the other hand, in 2015, what we're seeing of the Taliban movement is an extremely decentralized group. I mean, the links between the fighters and the commanders with their leadership shuras and leadership councils in Pakistan somehow heavily damaged already because of the American attacks and between 2009, especially after 2010, 2011 era. So the Taliban even evolved into being an extremely decentralized group that each part of them were directly connected to a source of funding that was not controlled and not managed by the Taliban leadership. So right now, I think it will be very difficult, if not impossible, for the Taliban to kind of create another image of like a man as legitimate to them as Mullah Omar. But on the other hand, given that their sources of funding and supplies are not controlled by the Taliban leadership or councils, and their continuous survival depends on receiving this flow of supplies from Pakistan, then I think it might actually affect little in terms of the Taliban capacity, but but gradually it will delegitimize their movement in the eyes of both their supporters and in general the Afghans who
I think at this moment, with all your input, our audience is already having a very thorough understanding of the realities of Taliban as to what it's made up of and how it's operating at the moment. The most important question is, what does it mean to the rest of the world? It seems, Mr. Ye, first of all, the peace process, the peace negotiations has been postponed. Supposed to be held in China and Pakistan. China said, we understand because of the leadership issue inside the Taliban, and therefore it has postponed. But what would that mean for the peace process? Will they be postponed continuously as a result?
No, I don't think so. The peace talking will be restored in the certain times. In my understanding, someone will come up to continue the peace talk process with the Kabul central government. But the question is the implementation. Whether this peace talk deal could be continued is rely on the commandos. Actually, it's not totally relying up to the shooter, the quitter shooter. And another thing is, we always say this, that there's only one thing is more dangerous than fighting against the emir or king in Afghanistan. That's you're fighting against thousands of them. Now, Taliban probably, if the Mullah Mansour could fully control this organization, we will see many different small groups. Afghan central government, these security forces has a problem. They're not so capable on fighting. So if they can eliminate the one group, how possible they can eliminate thousands of them? If such kind of things happen, we will see there's a civil war, but you can't see there's opposite parties. You will see one government and thousand rebellions. There's a very fragile situation in Afghanistan.
Because, Mr. Sharifi, the uncertainty of the realities of the Taliban, therefore, it left us with so many different possibilities for continuation of any peace talk, and also for others to look at the future nature of the Taliban and therefore react in different ways by the international community. Mr. Sharifi, the thing is getting ever more complicated about peace talk. Your thought?
I think the whole issue of the peace negotiations to a degree depends on what will happen with the Taliban, but I think it will mostly depend also the performance of the Afghan government. So far, in the last, in this war season, the Taliban launched massive operations around the country with active support of their supporters from outside the borders. They didn't manage to make any score or any kind of a big claim or big victory. They took some places, they immediately lost, they suffered huge casualties. And I think Mullah Mansour, his message also clearly shows that he wants to continue fighting because it's kind of a traditional way of proving that I'm a capable war leader. And depending on how the Afghan government and Afghan army will perform in the next couple of months in terms of like holding off the Taliban attacks or kind of protecting the areas, then I think there will be kind of proof that to show and at least an image that the continuous war, especially with the leadership crisis that's happening within the Taliban leadership, it is futile. So I think in seeing at least, I'm expecting at least war for another 5 months or something, and then the possibility if the Afghan government managed to hold on, and then there's a possibility that both sides kind of see that, okay, might be an opportunity to have a talk. We should not forget that also that the people who are associated with the ISIS, though they're also threatening Taliban in the certain parts of the country.